G'day everybody, and for those who are coming late, you're listening to Expand the Phantom Podcast. We are the Expand the Phantom Podcast from Chronicle Chamber. Our website is chroniclechamber.com, and you can contact us via email, which is chroniclechamber@gmail.com. You can subscribe to us via YouTube, iTunes, and many other Android apps. This is episode 168, which originally started off as a comics and news for September, with a special guest, but that special guest, we had some technical issues and we had a really great chat. And so instead of putting it all together as one big podcast, we've decided to split it as two. So what we're going to do is we're going to listen to the first part now, which is with Grange Wallis, who is the cover artist for these amazing Ibis Mysteries comics. I've only got 3 here, as you can see if you're on YouTube. But so we're going to be talking about these plus a whole heap of other stuff, and then after that we will get into the comics and news with the boys. So over to you, Sammy.
500 years ago, he washed ashore the sole survivor of a shipwreck, and upon the skull of the man who killed his dad, he said, "I'm mad, I must eradicate piracy, injustice and cruelty, and all my sons will follow me, so evildoers will believe that this man cannot die." The Phantom, the ghost who walks. The Phantom, enemies beware. The Phantom's always there, but you won't find the Phantom. He finds you.
For those who've come in late, the Ibis Mystery, which has been the latest story coming out from Frew, is actually an old story. It's a Teen Phantom story from Norman Walker and Carrie Lepinen from the early 90s. That was first published by Frew in issues 1064 to 1067. And for that first Australian print, the covers were done by Antonio Lemos, apart from part 3, which was done by Carrie Lepinen. Now, for the present day print run, numbers 1873 to 1876, the covers were created by friend of the podcast, Grange Wallis. And today we are very fortunate to have Grange join us today. Welcome, Grange. How are you today, mate?
Very well, thanks, Stephen. That is a hell of an intro. But just rapt to be here, and thanks for accepting my own personal invite to be on the show, asking you guys to be on the show. So I appreciate it. And I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
A very easy conversation. I'm not sure you invited yourself or we're just talking about how much we love the covers, and it all evolved from there, mate. So we're very happy to have you here.
Oh, well, thanks. So, I to be honest with you, I think Melbourne ISO was getting to me, and I just needed the conversation with a couple of comic book fans, and especially Phantom fans, would be great, because all these artworks I've actually ended up doing in ISO, and through a slightly difficult period in my own personal life, but yeah, they've been a labour of love, and they've really kind of got me through this whole thing. So being able to talk about it publicly, and see what you and the rest of the Phantom fandom think of it, is a real treat for me. So thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
Our pleasure.
Now, what number beer are you up to? We're going to be doing a tally during the night. I think you and Dan are good old beer buddies. So we'll be amiss if we didn't have a tally started at the start of the podcast.
Well, as I said to you off air, my wife's expecting, for those who are playing at home. And we're due in about a month and a half or so. So obviously she hasn't been, but I've barely been drinking lately, or just if I do, maybe one here, there and everywhere. But tonight, it's been a long week. I've been working on footy cards. I've been working on a whole bunch of stressful things, and I needed to have a couple of beers. And the most exciting thing that ever happened to me this entire week was that I went to the bottle shop, and they said, if you buy 3 of these particular beers, you get a beer stein. So I'm enjoying that. And I'm having 2 beers tonight, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's Friday.
Absolutely.
And I haven't seen my mum for 2 months.
Yeah.
So this is exciting for me.
And Dan, for the tally, what number are you up to?
Well, beer 4, but I'm a Queenslander, so I need 4 beers to start having a conversation with anybody.
Awesome. So
I was asleep, and I was asleep 10 minutes ago, so I didn't have a chance to get to the fridge.
Very good.
So even in isolation, some things do not change. So Grange, we've got you on to talk about the covers. So I think I remember last time we actually had you on the podcast, you gave us a very sneaky peek that you were looking at doing these covers. And that would have been probably about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, I think.
I don't think it's that long. I think because I only got the job for these in around about November, September, I think, last year. But it was funny because they said, "Oh, look." So when we were all away in Sydney Supernova last year, I spoke to Dudley and Glenn, and I basically, this is just the way I tackle everything with my own freelance career. Is I will. Whoever's employing me or offering to employ me, I always try to set goals with them as though I was a normal, employee, because I think it's important to have goals and, talk about projects and the potential for a new collaboration here, there and everywhere. So basically being very inspired by Jamie Johnson's work with how he did a few interconnecting covers in the last few years, I was like, that's actually a pretty good, that's a good target to reach in terms of my own creative output. And it's a real challenge. I didn't know how challenging it was until this project, but it is challenging. And it was just something I wanted to do for myself. And so I spoke to Dudley and Glenn, and they were both pretty nice about it and obviously very accommodating. And they said, well, look, we've got the Ibis Mystery. We've been thinking about redoing a print on that and actually adding a sequel issue to it. So all said and done, it will be 5 issues, which is out of the cat's out of the bag on that one. But unfortunately, due to the artist's perfect, the sequential artist on the inside of the next issue, due to whatever personal circumstances they're going through, it's been a bit of a delay. So it's actually given me a bit of extra time to sort of put that 5th cover's polish on. But yeah, so that's just basically how it came about. And then because when they offered me the set, I was like, this is fantastic, but do I have a few months to get to it? And they're like, yeah, you've got a while, almost about a year to get it sort of done. But I think they might have wanted it earlier, but then because I had a whole bunch of projects towards the end of last year and then COVID happened and I had some holiday time with my wife at the start of 2020, not knowing what year we were about to have. And then it sort of kept getting pushed back, and I ended up losing a lot of the work that I'd planned for the year, and I ended up going back to my old, construction work that I haven't done for about 10 years. I used to be in advertising before that, and I've had little advertising stints whilst I've been an illustrator. But yeah, it was just find some work, any work. And then after a week after I found out I was labouring, when I was labouring, I ended up finding out my wife was pregnant. So this year's just been an absolute spectacle. I'll put it that way. There's a military word that they use for this, but yeah, I'll go with spectacle. Something like a cluster, something.
Yeah, we won't say that.
Fubar.
Yeah, we don't want to click the E button when we upload this podcast.
How long were you on the tools for in the end, Grange, back at labouring?
It was funny because I had work coming in and it was sort of stockpiling, if that makes any sense. I had these covers and I had the footy card people were hovering about, and the person that cancelled a lot of the work that I was supposed to be doing for the year came back with a few things, and then all of a sudden I was inundated with work, and so I ended up working for about 3 months on the tools, and just because of the way this year's sort of gone, there's a very good chance that I'll be going back on tools in a month or so, month and a half, which is fine. It's just, it's COVID, so you got to do what you can. Yeah. I'm very confident and secure in my career, and I don't really have any issues with it, and I actually enjoyed it. It was actually nice to have like a better description, a bit of a career break. It took the mental aspect out of always hunting for work, looking for the next set of projects and all that sort of stuff away from me. So that was kind of nice. And I was working with some of my best mates, so that always helps.
I was going to say, you must know somebody, because that's awesome that there's somewhere that's flexible enough for you to come in as you need to.
Yeah, it's Well, because basically at this point in my career, like I can't do carpentry and stuff like I used to or anything like that. And I was never a licensed carpenter or anything like that. So it was just labouring. So like demo work, they've got a few different job sites and a few things like that. And my mate Matt, who's I was one of the groomsmen for him, and he was one of the groomsmen for me at my wedding. And yeah, he's just sort of been accommodating, and he thought it was really good, and he enjoyed, and we really enjoyed working together, which is nice. And you know, like the job's changed for a little bit. The guy that I was working, like who we're both working for, he was like, "Oh, look, do you have anything to go on with your stuff at the moment? I'm a little bit, you know, I'm trying to move on this job and that job. Can you work for yourself for 2 weeks again?" And then, funnily enough, I was getting a little bit stressed about the amount of work that I had to catch up on because I was doing too much labouring, and I started getting like loyal to that job and not enough loyalty to my own career. And it was just that funny sort of, you know, the teamship, matemanship thing. So yeah, I ended up getting back into my own work. And then as I got back into my work, I started emailing some contacts as well. And then more work came out of it. And then I've actually like, I've been working almost 7 days a week for the last 4 months.
Oh, well,
So,
yeah.
Right, that's great.
Yeah, well, we appreciate
Thanks.
you taking a break out and talking to us.
Trust me, I needed this.
So I guess it's a good segue. I've, like Stephen, I've only got the first 3 parts in the mail myself. First of all, you've done a great job with these, Grange. Are you happy with them? With the covers?
Nah, I hate them.
Spoken like a true
Nah,
artist.
in all
Yeah,
honesty,
can you hear all the tripe that he keeps spilling about him on Facebook? You know,
what was that, sorry, Steve?
all the tripe you've been spilling about him on Facebook. You're real devo about the way they've turned out.
That's true. But, you know, like, I think I was really thrilled when I could finally get to the point and sit down and draw them. I really wanted to do them traditionally at the time, but because a couple of projects fell in my lap, I ended up not having the time to actually sit down and do them on paper and ink and all that sort of stuff. And then it came a process of actually just deciding to do the best job that I could using the tools at my disposal with the digital, the iPad that I use, and I was still learning how to use the iPad and the new software. So it was a bit of a labour of love having to learn the new software and sort of make something out of it. But it was also a funny time because my mum is one of 5 sisters and 2 brothers, so she's a big family, but they're all quite young. And one of my aunties, who's a twin, actually was passing away at the time when I was starting the first cover, and then she actually passed away when I was finishing the second cover. So, funnily enough, they were sort of like I've always heard that thing on like TV and all that sort of stuff about like when you're upset or when you experience a loss, you should throw yourself into your work and find your way back into the daily grind via that. And it was the first time I've ever experienced it, as well as also being able to action that. So like I actually did sort of find it in the work. And I feel like the first cover, which I really enjoyed drawing, but that was more about like drawing all the components and making them look good for my own, like, for my own standard. But then the second one, I had a bit more time to sort of catch up and throw it into. But then Chris Wall's next giant-sized issue came out, like with that great artwork with him and Catman and like the big thing of the fandom. And I'm like, Jesus, I was really proud of my last cover, but look at that level that guy's just done. So if you look at the second cover, the face on that, I spent a lot of time on the fandom's face on that to try and sort of catch up a little bit on Chris Wall. I'm not saying that I'm anywhere near that genius's work, but like I really sort of like try to find the next gear with that. And whilst I was thinking about my auntie, I was just I was allowing myself to sort of like process what I was going through by drawing that. So there's a lot of extra detail in that, which is just me polishing the artwork, as also well as going through whatever I was going through at the moment, because I've never experienced a loss like that before, and it was quite tough.
Nice.
Well, thanks for sharing that with us, Grange, because it's a personal story, and we appreciate you sharing it with us and everyone else who's listening. And looking at 1874 now, which is that second one that you're talking about, you're absolutely right. The level of detail in that, you could absolutely tell that you'd leveled up on the face. I thought in terms of the detail that you went to with it. And every aspect of the cover, you can tell has been really carefully thought through.
Yeah, thanks. I actually feel like it was cathartic in a way, because like I feel like it elevated it elevated my work a little bit because of that whole sort of process. Because like I'm not sure if you follow sort of like athletes talk about it, and like artists talk about it. It's like when you train, and then you have like a flow moment, and then like you just get into a groove, and then it was a bit of a flow moment in that cover, like where it just sort of poured out of me, like a better description, because I was looking at a few different things. But so that one and the third cover, which you've all got by the sounds of it, were those two like moments. Like the third one I'm actually quite happy with, because I actually didn't look up a scrap of reference except for the cave behind Kit. Like that was the only thing that I referenced from the book. I knew there was a giant eel in it, and I had to make the villain my own because of his sort of nationality aspect to like his original costume on the inside of the interiors of the sequential art, because of just the direction of the way everything's going with King Features. Like we've got to try and make everything a little bit more racially ambiguous. Yep. So just because just to keep it up to date. So I sort of had a bit more freedom with the way I drew the mummy villain, and it was just a bit of fun just sort of going into that. So those two covers they're kind of special to me, and I think I'm always going to remember them quite fondly.
From memory, you had a bit of an issue with one of your last covers. Was it the slaves?
Yeah, that's one.
Yeah, where you had to. What was the word you used? You had to universally racial him or something like that. So you used the word. What was the word you used?
To be honest with you, that's a very good question. I'm not sure if it was on the record, but it was just like,
I think
basically I had to.
You mean people should skip back 30 seconds and listen to what Grange just said?
All right, we'll do that then.
Yeah, you just have to make it more ambiguous in terms of, because the Phantom is a character who's steeped in a lot of history, and he's had some great stories based in history, and Lee Falk always wanted to sort of use the Phantom as a teaching tool of history, but unfortunately his own history has almost been tampered by this current climate, which will probably not necessarily be the current climate, but the climate that's here to stay, in the sense that it's the classic story of the Anglo-Saxon superhero saving the natives and all that sort of stuff, which is a little bit of, unfortunately for the Phantom, is a little bit of a dated principle. But I think that what we've got to try and do as Phantom creators is sort of just find a way of reinventing the Phantom. I mean, if you look at Batman, and if you look at Superman, if you look at all the other top tier superheroes that have been around forever, as long as the Phantom, but not as long as the Phantom, they have all been reinvented. And I think one of the things that I can do as a cover artist is just sort of toe that line about like bringing in a new audience, making sure that my characters or characterizations of the characters, like a better description, is a fair representation and fair shake for everybody that's involved in the book, and including the characters. So I think that's just one of those things that I had to learn by having to redraw some of the characters, because I just drew them the way they were in the book originally, not thinking anything about it, because I don't know, I just didn't think that way. But having a guy with a bag of grenades and a turban is not necessarily something that you can draw in a book these days. And it's got to be, sort of like the things like, we can't have the Phantom, hunting endangered species anymore, like, because we're trying to obviously discontinue that sort of promotion of violence against exotic animals, because, trophy hunting is terrible and a few things like that. So it's just one of those things, you got to involve you've got to evolve with the character. And that was just one of the things I had to learn along the way.
It could, guys, it could be a good, an interesting podcast chat maybe we won't get into it too much today, but could be an interesting podcast chat about whether the Phantom needs to, be reinvented or moved along or something like that. So, it's very, very good thoughts there, Grange.
You're gonna hate me for this, but he definitely does. Like he's right for it. Like he's got such a great storyline, and it could just be repurposed and beautiful. Like I just feel like refreshes and reboots have got a bad rap, but they can be so beautifully done. So I actually feel like I'd love to see a fresh reinterpretation of the Phantom, but still keep sort of like what Star Trek did with the new movies, where they kept the original series untouched, but then they had some sort of a time traveling element that just set it off on a different tangent, and it's a all new thing.
And
whether you like those movies or not, it's different.
The Phantom lends itself to that so easily. If you just click your fingers and go, all right, we're going to start telling the story of the 24th Phantom, who is beginning his journey in 2020, you could almost get the whole series back on kilter. And the mechanism to do that is built into the generational hero.
Yeah,
exactly.
It will probably be the 24th Phantom for the year 2040.
It depends how your maths wants to work out. Anyway,
all the people that like the TV show. I'm talking about the TV show because the 2040, TV show. So but no, I think we'll probably do that as a podcast discussion down the track. So I appreciate that that introduction to a future podcast, Grange.
Little sizzler reel.
Yeah, we might even have to get you in on it as well, so that way people will hate you and not us.
Well, I've got some strong ideas on it, so grab your pen and paper. I reckon I could reinvent the Phantom if you want to.
Right. So we'll move back. Yeah, let's move back to the covers. So, what were you going to say, sorry?
No, that was it. You cut me off at the right time.
Sorry. So how do you go about to creating 4/5 covers? Like, could you just briefly tell us your process? What's your mind? Have you got pencil sketches or if you don't mind just telling us a little bit.
Yeah, well, so basically I got the original stories and I ended up rereading them and then, like making notes on what I thought were the cool bits, like in each issue, there's a
question, Grange. Did Frew send you fresh copies of the books, or did you go back and pick up 1064, 1065, the old stories?
They sent me them. So they sent me all the old ones here. So
nice.
Yep.
And what about part 5? Have you seen that?
Doesn't exist.
Okay.
So I went through that and then I looked at the covers and I was like, okay, these are pretty cool. And then I had these grand plans of what I was going to do, and the only cover that looks exactly like the original is the first cover. So I'm not sure how this will show up for you and your viewers, but so that's the first one here with the two ladies behind the coven table, the giant baboon lion, the Phantom, and the Pharaoh. So then that's the only thing that lasted from on the second issue was the back cover with the mountain people, and then I had the Phantom running out of the mine shaft with the villain sort of and pulling out Hero, and then it was going to go into the the Phantom cutting Kit, and then the bracelet and the eel, and then the last one here with the big Ibis. But then when I knew there was going to be 5th cover, I'm going to save the Ibis for the last issue, and then Devil and the Phantom, like the way he was in the original cover with the villain there. But what happened is, as I was drawing this one, I hated this section here, and Glenn gave me some feedback saying, we'd like it if you varied the size of the Phantom up a bit. So he's not always like this small guy against a big threat, which is just how I interpreted the story. And then, I just basically, I've got screen recordings of all the covers of how I drew them. So the second one and the third one, you'll just see me trying to do my layout about 10 or 15 times each, like scribbles, and then rubbing it all out and then starting again until I landed on the ones that you've all got in your hands now. And then the last cover, I had this idea of it just being like the Phantom in like this sort of ghostly, misty, like burning out forest from the explosion, and everything's in ash and he's covered in white, and it's him, hero, and devil just like side profile walking through like this ashy field. And I said it to Dudley, and he's like, it's a bit plain. He's like, it's a bit plain. It's not as dynamic as the other ones. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I hated it, and I ended up like procrastinating on it for a few weeks. No, actually about a week, because I didn't have that long to finish it. And then I basically like was looking at it, and I was like, I hate this so much. And I just like deleted it, and I drew the fourth cover, which you've all seen online at least, over the weekend. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, mine as
and
well.
I just thought it would be cool to do like a Phantom that's just fresh out of an explosion, shrapnel all in his back, and just going like, ugh.
Like a tough day at the office.
Yeah, that's exactly how everyone's been putting it. And
It's the cover for
he's
20.
got to have a bad day every now and then, doesn't he?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, you're right, Stephen. It is like a very it is a 2020.
So you've got it in your hands, Dan. What do you think of it in
Yeah,
flesh?
no, I do have it here. It arrived yesterday as a subscriber, so it'd be the first one in a long time I've got before Jermaine, I think. So no, I really love it. I think that when you first showed it to us, I was a bit, it jumps out at you because it is the Phantom, victorious, but having had that bad day, and we don't see too many of him, especially cover images of the Phantom being just beat up and had it. So no, it was it grabs your attention, and again the attention to detail in the face again I think is pretty impressive as well.
Oh, thanks. Because like to be honest with you, like it's this weird thing. Like I'm not sure how the other Phantom artists fare when they're drawing a cover. But I'm literally just thinking the whole time it's like a war of contrition between me, my pen, and God damn, I hope the fans like this. I'm just like, I just really don't want to upset anyone, which is probably the worst way to be as an artist because you're just probably like trying to please too many people. But I know that my work's a little bit more contemporary than some Phantom fans like. But I just basically like to try and bring a cinematic feel to every cover that I do. Like I love those traditional pop culture, like those 40s, 50s cinematic posters that were all illustrated, but also like the Phantom Humanes books that were just reprinted, like the old classic painted covers. I think they look sensational, and I want to sort of have my work in my own style be to the side of that, like paying homage to it. But
yeah. Well, you with the terminology about the cinematic style, I got that from I think it was your second cover, which was the story with the sword into it.
The Guardians of the Galaxy one.
That was the kind of feel I got. Was that big Marvel, big cinema style and stuff like that. So it's interesting you using that terminology because that was the feel I got with that one as well. So yeah.
Oh, thanks. Well, yeah, that's as a cover artist for Frew. That's my goal is to make it as cinematic as possible for the audience because I look at the Phantom and I see all the other superheroes that are getting movies and cartoons and TV shows, and I'm just like, why not the Phantom? Like every time I see a new issue of the Phantom come to me and I read it, I'm like, this is just as good as any episode of the 90s Batman comic, a cartoon that Paul Dini and Bruce Timms did. So I'm just like, and I've spoken to Duncan Munro, we caught up on a Zoom a few weeks ago, and I was just like, I really feel like the way to bring life back into this character would be like a really tight serial Netflix show. Like they've done great jobs with Voltron. What else have they done? The new Transformers cartoon was pretty good. I liked, but like just getting that IP, giving him a really good list of rogue gallery. Like giving the fandom, like, inventing some really good core villains, like, besides just the pirates, that just everybody will be like, I fell in love with that villain. Like, they've got to be as likable as the fandom, like the Joker and all that sort of stuff. Like, I feel like the fandom needs a bit more of a mythology built around him in terms of who his threats are. Because for mine, it's like every issue is a different villain, and it's different. You know, sometimes it's Jack the Ripper, and sometimes it's this guy or whatever else, or some witch, or a phantasm. But I just feel like if you'd really just distilled the character down and then put it in a really tight animation with a really good set of story arcs, they could even, do the flashbacks and the Chronicle Chamber sort of stuff and show you some of the, the previous fandom's work that teaches the current fandom to get through those processes. It could just be an amazing story, and it could be an amazing series that sort of blows the doors open on what the fandom can be able to do as an intellectual property.
Mm.
You're preaching to the converted here. We've often said that sort of stuff about it. A Netflix series would do wonders for the Phantom. And when you're talking about like a rogues gallery, and you're saying, the Phantom has a huge rogues gallery because, like you said, there's a new villain every issue. So an idea for that is like pick one of those fellas, like say a fan favorite like Mr. Hogg, and actually really flesh him out, and he'd be the big bad guy, and like he could be like. But then, I suppose a criticism for that would be that he'd be like, he was the guy from Daredevil.
Kingpin.
Big.
Yeah, Kingpin. So that might draw a likeness to that. So pick somebody else, I guess. But
there's as you say, there's a countless array of villains to choose from. The Nomad, Sahara, Python, and I'm only naming ones that have probably been invented in the Tony DePaul era. But Labanga as well. Like there's so many.
The Black Carnations, another one. Hydra, the Vultures.
Vultures would be good.
the Vultures would be great.
Yeah, we've actually Grange, you're on fire tonight. We've actually one of the things we have actually been talking about for the last 18 months is doing a villains podcast. So
maybe that's the premise we need to use. Is as the rogues gallery.
Yeah. So in saying what you did, I think Moonstone did it. And we're getting very distracted, so this would be a very long podcast. But Moonstone and Mike Bullock did it very, very well, where he introduced a whole bunch of villains, and then he pitched them all together, fighting the Phantom in, I think it was Checkmate, which was episodes 21, 22, 23, and 24. I believe it was, where it was. So you had like
I'm actually going to disagree with you at the moment, mate.
Where you had like about 6 or 7 bad guys all coming together and fighting against the Phantom.
It's just 6.
So 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 there is a little bit of precedence in the Phantom world, but you're right. You're preaching to the Phantom.
Yeah. So what I meant to say is, I'm not saying that the Phantom doesn't have any villains, but I just think that the greater population only knows the Phantom, and they don't know his villains. It's like.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that The Flash and Batman and Spider-Man are so successful as IPs is that their villains are as successful as the character.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, Superman is only Lex Luthor, really. A lot of people might know Bizarro or...
There's a general as well.
Doomsday, maybe, and Darkseid. So, like, it's just... You've got to have really good villains because your villains are as much the bread and butter of the IP as the hero. So, for mine, I just thought... if you do like something really tight with the Phantom where it's like a really like no holds bar sort of like gritty tale without it being like violent, something that kids could get into, like, it doesn't have to be over the top, but just like a gritty tale, like where the Phantom's got his back against the wall sort of thing. But you introduce some villains with some really good backstories and you really flesh them out. So they're like anti-heroes / villains and all that sort of stuff like they did in the 90s Batman show. It's like, it's a formula that breeds success. Like ever since the 80s and the 90s in terms of movies and stuff like that, if you make the villains as interesting as the heroes, those IPs last and last and last, like Terminator, Predator, Aliens. Like people want to know more about the villains than they do want about the heroes. Not that
You look at all of the various villains from the walks of life of the Phantom, whether you've got seafaring pirates, you've got terrorists, you've got dictators,
Mystics.
princes. There's so many different types you could draw from. And to explore the backstory of a Sing pirate, that's his family business. He's born into that, and that's just how he has always understood the world to be, and understanding what makes all of those villains tick. Even in, I think, a more real world, obviously the Phantom's more set in the real world than your Marvel or your DC characters are, where that sort of superhuman super villain as well can exist. In the Phantom's real world, that's a little bit harder, but there's still the stories of the characters, how they arrived at that point, for sure. It can be just
exactly. That's essentially what I'm talking about. Like with Sing Pirates, it's like, what is it about that mantle that gets passed down from father to son? Like, why are they the opposite of the Phantom? Like, what is the father so abusive that the son can't help but retroactively become them? Like, even though they're trying to be better, and then they they fall in love with somebody, doesn't work out, they try and live the piratehood, and then they end up falling back in the throes of despair back into pirate, and then they become like slowly meaner and crueler than their father was ever before them. And just little narrative beats to sort of like go, that version of that character, like that Sing pirate, like give him a name, give him a backstory that makes him so alluring that one becomes so much more iconic than the other 80 years worth of them. Like, that's, what I mean? Like, it's just that sort of, like, that's why we love the Phantom, because he's got that lore. You've got to give that to the other characters around him. You know what I mean? Like, that's just how I feel. And I just feel like there's such a good quantity of storytellers at the moment. There's such a good quantity of creatives at the moment, and all of them are looking for a job as well at the moment.
And there's a lot of people looking for entertainment too.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a big ass need for entertainment. But I just feel like there's a lot of people that find respect in like rebuilding IP and making it amazing again. I mean, like, for example, one of my favorite movies from the last couple of years was Blade Runner 2049, because it was a sequel that did not feel like it needed to be made, or it was not just a cash grab, and it ended up not being a cash grab because it bombed. But it was so dripping in the truth and the realism of the first film. It actually made the first film better in retrospect when you watch it, the second film, because of what like if you watch the first film after seeing the second film, you're like, oh my God, they really picked up all these narrative points and just turned it into this brand. Like, I don't know, I love that film so much. I could talk about that in its own podcast for hours. But yeah.
All right. Well, we will go back onto the comics and news topics. And I think
it's my fault. I'm so sorry, guys.
I think that episode 168 is now an interview with Grange Wallis, and record comics and news separately.
And then
we'll. This supposed to be a 15-minute chat as well. Anyway,
yeah.
That was never going to happen.
And then, and we'll talk more about the villains in the next in one of our next podcasts. So, will these covers be made into a poster?
Yes.
With part 5.
But if you can find anybody with a wall long enough, I'll give you a medal.
I was going to ask, are they going to be like side by side, as in what Jamie's done, or are you mixing them up?
Well, if it was 6 covers or 4 covers, I had actually considered doing like one here, then the like 2 rows, lack of a better description. But then when it was 5, I'm like, I can't make that work. But yeah, so it's just going to be one really long one, or alternatively, it might be 5 that you buy individually and that you could actually frame up individually next to each other, or you could combine them into the one frame. So how that looks at the moment, we don't know, because I've got to do the 5th cover. But it's just, it's more than likely going to be a one long sort of tapestry, and that's the way I kind of like it. Like, like those traditional Japanese tapestries where you can follow the story along for a long period. So I'm hoping that it all comes together pretty well. And I think I sent you guys a rough one on our little chat that we've got going on some social platform.
Yeah. So, I'll put in my order right now for a bar runner. I've got a bar, and having that as a runner would be outstanding, and I think it'd be about right. So if you don't do that, I'll probably have to buy a spare copy of each of these, rip the covers off, laminate them, and make my own. So
make sure you get a quality laminate that's got like a non-slip texture to it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's actually a great idea. I'll let Glenn know about that. But
Well,
it looks like it's going to be a long one.
Yeah. So what's your process in doing that? Because obviously you are going to each cover. You've shown us the ideas you had, the thumbnails that turned into what they turned into or didn't as a result of your process. So you've got firm ideas about what each. You've got firm ideas about what each cover is going to look like, but then you at the end think about what the next one's going to look like or how to stitch towards that, or can you talk us through how you make those decisions? Because colour, the movement, everything.
There was a little bit of Dan Andrews about it. Like, it was a bit of management on the fly because it sort of got away from me. Like, I was drawing.
Hey, I better put some context here, Grange. These guys probably don't know who Dan Andrews is.
No, we're well aware
of Victoria. So what I mean by that is like I made one change thinking that it will still work, and then it didn't, and then I had to keep making more changes on the fly. So basically what ended up happening was I drew each cover individually. So like I drew one, and then as I was finishing the second, like, so for example, I drew the first cover, and as I was finishing the second cover, I went back to the first one's file, copied like a slither of the end of it, and then sort of merged it and overlaid it onto the other one. But the thing is, there were sort of like some skeletal features in between all the sketches that sort of did line up, and I knew what I was doing, but I had to basically like color match everything on each cover. So like take the ends off and then draw a new artwork to connect them, like a mini artwork. And then that sort of just like ended up being my process through the whole thing, where I just basically overlay the previous cover on top of the back side of the first cover and then sort of drew it in. The only thing is there's been a few things where I didn't exactly get the lineups right for the print cut lines. So like, for example, the third cover and the fourth cover, there's actually a double, like if you line them up together, you can see two parts of the cave lines that are identical. Like if you go back to back, then you can overlay them and make it look sweet.
Dan's busy doing it now.
Dan's doing it now.
Dan's the only one that's got part 4.
Oh yeah, I see where you are. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a small little detail, but yeah, it's just not 100% lined up. So you can see how the side of the cave is a little too far into the back cover.
So this is going to be just for people who are trying to line up their print versions. Obviously, in the poster or whatever, as it comes together, that won't be a concern at all. And look, how many people are seriously going to go home and line up their print versions? So
everyone will be after.
I don't know, man. I've been already getting a lot of hate mail about it. Nah, it's a joke. But if they want the really good version, they're just going to have to wait for the poster, I suppose.
Yeah. Now, talking about hate mail, you made a mention before that, like you're very wary about appealing to Phantom fans and all that. You've done work for a lot of other different mediums, especially like football, and I'm assuming that football fans are very vocal and stuff like that as well. How are Phantom fans compared to other fans of some of the other IPs that you've done work on? Are they as brutal as what we think they are, or are they more forgiving, or what? Do you have any experience in that? Or
I have plenty of experience, and I have some stories to tell if you really have the time for it. But the fact of the matter is that when you're dealing with anything that people love, if it's got a fan base of more than a couple of thousand, you're not going to please everybody. And I don't try and actively please everybody because I'm not that immature to think that I can. But I aim to please at least the vast majority. So what I mean by saying that is that I want my phantom to look strong and heroic. And when it comes to the football cards, and if I do a mascot or a footy player, I want them to look like the commanding presence that they should be. So it's about basically trying to pinch as many of the basic feelings that most people have towards these intellectual properties. You know, like Batman's supposed to be dark, Superman's supposed to be, you know, bright blue and heroic. Your football team's supposed to be tough. Your fandom's supposed to be, you know, flamboyant, but at the same time mysterious in a few different elements. So that's one of the reasons why I always make him look like he's got like a reflective, like glowing goggles. So, you know, he's the ghost who walks, to make him look a little bit more ethereal. But at the same time, he's an athlete and he's a strong superhero and he's a gunslinger. So like I would try and have all those sort of things. Like I like to keep his gun belt moving, like he's like what am I saying?
Swashbuckle.
There we go. And yeah, so it's just like you've got to cherry pick your elements to make it the most classic version in your own style. So I always aim for that. But then, you know, like my first cover for this for the Ibis Mystery came out, and when I popped up one of my pictures, like one group of people were like, "That jaw's ridiculous," blah 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 blah. And, you know, like, obviously you have some talent, but, you know, you can't draw. And I was like, okay, so that makes no sense. She just paid me a compliment or slapped me in the face with a wet fish. So, and then I responded to it and I was like, oh, thanks. It was just a few hours of my work, of my life. But that's fine feedback. They deleted that comment. But, you know, like, you have to deal with these sort of things here, there, and everywhere, because you have to, when it comes to illustration, the Phantom on the first cover is actually the smallest version of all 4 covers. Yep. So you have to slightly exaggerate his proportions a little bit for him to be the recognizable feature in the comic versus, you know, the Ibis, Pharaoh and everything else, because there's a lot going on. But then if I do a tight crop and post it online, which is what I did do, and because it's at a higher resolution that's ready for print media, they see the exaggerated features and they just like rip you to shreds on it. And it's like, yeah, but you haven't seen the whole... But if I started sweating that and getting upset, like with all those little comments, you wouldn't hear from me ever again. I wouldn't be here. I'd just be like, that's it. I'm going to go like Lollipop Man or something. Like, just do something where I can just control like the people that I'm dealing with in front of me, and rather than worrying about people online and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it's interesting listening to creators talk about the pitfalls of social media.
Okay, so take 2. Welcome back from technical difficulties. Behind the scenes, we've just wasted 45 minutes or something while we try and work stuff out between us. Anyway, while at various points during the off-air, as different people have tried to get back onto the Zoom conversation, Grange, we were talking about, I guess, the comparison between the original covers that Antonio Lemos did against the covers that you've done. So I'm holding up at the moment on YouTube for those who are there, 1094, which is this one, and we see exactly the same 3. Sorry, 1064. Good call. 1064. We see the same 3 characters on the cover. Phantom's still in the foreground, but they're very different images, and we see the same thing across the part 2, where basically we've got the same 2 characters, but vastly different compositions and looks, even getting further away from that by the time, and you mentioned this right at the start of the chat, very different in the 3rd issue, and then in the 4th one, very different again. So can you just tell us a little bit about how you use, because Antonio Lemos is an artist that we all love, and is synonymous with Phantom Comics for 20 years. Can you just tell us a little bit more about how you sort of took the composition that he'd done and reimagined it, or I think in the sketches you were showing us earlier on that your horse in for part 4 was pretty similar to what Antonio had done, but then you went in a completely different direction. So can you just talk about all of that?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, like Antonio, like I just couldn't get over how warm he was when I met him at Supernova last year. Like I remember he came up he slid up behind me and he's like, oh, I had a look at my aunt, and he put his warm ass grandfather hands on my shoulders and had a look at my aunt. I was like, why do I feel instantly relaxed, like I'm under one of those like weighted blankets that I'm seeing advertised to me on Instagram every other 5 minutes? But yeah, he's just got a really nice way about him. So it was actually a real honour to go over and, you know, lack of a better description, reinterpret his work for the next generation. But the way, it's funny because I saw a whole bunch of homage art on the internet around the time that I actually started these covers, and they kind of agitated me to be a little bit, because basically what it was is like people would take a classic picture of, you know, a well-known artwork, say for example like the Spider-Man artwork where Spider-Man throws his costume in the bin and walks away. Like that's a famous synonymous with comics artwork, and you see everybody do it with every other character. But the thing is, it's never had the same gravity as the first time it was done, and it never will. So for me, it's always going to be a cheaper derivative piece of art that's copying something that's come before it. And nothing beats original art in my mind. So when it comes to me doing homage covers, and this is the closest I've been to doing a homage cover, was the first one in the Ibis Mystery, was that you take the idea. So the idea is a giant baboon, the Ibis pharaoh, and the phantom. You look at the assets that, like, that's what they are when you're thinking about it creatively. It's like, okay, so I need these elements. Draw them in your own way. It's that simple. Like, take those three assets that I mentioned, draw them in your own way, and I have to put a cover on the back. So then I was like, okay, let's make it a scene. So then I went into the book and I took some of the femme fatale warrior goddesses that are around the altar, threw them on the back cover. And then that's how I did it, because like I wanted to pay, like it is a homage cover. That's the closest I'll ever get to a homage cover without redrawing the exact cover in my own style thereabouts. So I've got a pretty strong view on it, and I know it's not necessarily popular in comic book circles, but I honestly think that you owe it to the fans, you owe it to yourself as an artist and your own personal growth, and you owe it to the original artist to not just blatantly rip off their work and then call it a homage out of some sort of respect that you can give them. So that's my tough view. But then with the subsequent issues, I started like really wanting to go away from it. So like I didn't want it to be exactly the same. I wanted it to be familiar to the audience, but then feel brand new, because that's my job. My job is to make it new. Like, yep. It's an old story. It's been printed before. Some of you, like you do, and you have a new collection. So what I have to do is entice you to want to pick it up again, read it again, feel it in a new print, smell that new ink feel, but then also get something that's a treat, which is hopefully my artwork that's wrapped in. But then, you know, so basically the first one went off without a hitch. And then like, as I started working on the other ones, I started realizing that I didn't like the original compositions that I showed you in the sketches before, and they altered in the pipeline of the way I drew them. So then they started becoming a bit more of my own thing, and it became a bit more organic. And then, so for like the last issue where we've got this sort of battle damage phantom, I like the idea of Antonio's sketch being later on in the story, whereas I decided to make mine a panel of he's just come out of the explosion. And I thought that would be a fun thing to add to the story.
And you said before, I can't remember now if it's on air or off air, but
it's been that way.
Yeah. That you went through a real process of change in the way that you were going to depict that fourth cover in particular with him riding off on Hero. And I think you said you might be able to share some of the
yes,
you did in the lead up to that.
So basically I had this idea of like, I'm not sure if you guys have noticed, because it's hard to line all the covers up in terms of like just space and without having too much of a reflection on the covers, given the glossy print that they're on. There's actually a bit of a colorway to it. So it goes from a strong purpley pinky hues into an orangey hues, and then it goes into like a blue hue, and then the last one's an orange, like a pink and then green hue. So originally I had an idea for the fourth cover, but then this would have actually ended up being a problem for the fifth cover if I did do this. And Dudley and Glenn sort of put me on the right track with this. But I had the idea of it being a white cover with the Phantom sort of walking through side, like on a side view, like on a cinematic style, like walking through the burnout area from the explosion, like just in like an ashy cloud, and just like sort of being almost like a bleak white, sort of like a Russian snowfield, lack of a better description, of the Phantom. And for some reason, one of the challenges that I'd set myself, my own personal goal for these series of covers, is I didn't want just static poses. And then what that actually ended up being was a static pose of just having the Phantom side profile, walking on a horse, left to right of the screen, of the viewer, lack of a better description, that I just thought it doesn't live up to the goals that I'd set myself for these artworks. I wanted each cover to be different. I wanted the Phantom to not just look like a placard character. It was just like, here's the Phantom, here's the next issue of the Phantom, buy it, it's a Phantom comic. Like, I wanted it to be a story of imagery on top of the story within the books. So basically I sent it to Dudley. Dudley seemed a little bit hesitant on his approval of it, and then I ended up scrapping this artwork. But the funny thing is I ended up enjoying the way I was drawing the Phantom, and I'll share it with you guys now. But it ended up being a little bit of a miss, and I think you'll see why I ended up scrapping it, because the idea was, like, you can see the little rectangle on the right hand side, that's going to be like where the Phantom logo is. The black area is where it would have connected to the cave with the third issue, and then I wanted the Phantom to sort of walk out, and then I was going to put like some of the imagery in the smoke from what he'd just been through, like just as a black and a white thing.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't working. The only thing that I liked about it was the Phantom's arm, and then I just realised that I didn't, and the blood off his chin, and I was like, this isn't going to work. And actually, I did like the burnt hair.
Oh, yeah.
That actually was redrawn in the new cover. So that's actually in the new cover. If you look at the top part of that cover, it's hard, blink and you miss it. But yeah, he's got cinched hair. I don't think I've got that issue here on me in here. No, I don't.
Is that the fourth one?
Yeah, the fourth one. So like on the back of his head,
Oh, yeah.
he's got like a bit of blown out area, where the A is.
Yeah, absolutely. You can sort of...
Yeah, so like I burnt the hair off on the top there. I just thought it'd be fun. The kid's going to have to go home, shave his head, and grow that out until he gets his luscious locks.
Absolutely.
But, he hides it under a hat or a scalp, so who knows if he even got hair. But yeah, so that was so like as a creative, you sort of got to realize when you're sort of backing a losing team, and you just got to like pivot and just make the right thing, which ended up being that cover, because I submitted it on a Monday. Dudley got back to me on a Tuesday, and then I basically ghosted Dudley till the Friday, saying I'd get back to him on Monday with a finished art. Saturday morning I got up and I was like, it's not happening, I'm not doing that artwork. And I just drew a new composition and worked really hard on Saturday, finished on Sunday, sent it to him on Monday morning. I was like, I've totally, like, here's a new composition, I've just redrawn the cover, please be gentle. Just sent it off to him. And he's like, great, mate, that's better than what it was.
And that's this one?
Yeah, that's that one.
Can I also say, like, the depiction of Hero, the face of I'm not sure that I've seen a horse so realistically depicted in a cover image, and I do love the little attention to detail of the good mark on the bridle there as well.
Oh, the mark, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought I did that for you guys. I just thought you'd enjoy it, like, because a lot of people got back to me about the cover that I did, the issue number I can't remember, but the one with the two femme fatales in front of the lava pit with the slave children.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I did a 13th Phantom, and I just I put a few flourishes in the costume.
Yeah. And the good mark was a little bit more flowery.
Yeah, so like a few people have liked that. And then with all the sketch covers that I did last year, I designed this idea of like when it comes to like neutral areas of the Phantoms, like cave and like the chamber, the Chronicle Chamber, and a few things like that. Like I draw a skull, but then I'll do the mark of the good on the skull, like if it identifies that this is, like neutral territory. So that's when like I was like, oh, I can't do the skull on Hero. He's a good guy. So that was the idea.
Mm.
I like
it's getting
it.
late, isn't it?
It is.
Oh, it's been a very, it'll be a very interesting podcast to edit this one.
Yeah. Well, hopefully people can piece it together and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Well, it's been great in unedited form, that's for sure.
Yeah. I really appreciate you just going into a lot of detail with the covers and just, you know, talking about the processes and the flow and the colours and everything that you went through. I've really enjoyed that. So, yeah, no, I really appreciate that.
No. Look, you guys are my mates as far as I'm concerned, so you're welcome. I don't feel like there's any benefit in me trying to look too professional or be like a completely untappable or unapproachable person. You know, like I'm not perfect in terms of like the way I deal with my audience and a few things like that. Sometimes I don't get back to them as quickly as I'd like to, or if at all, just because, you know, sometimes my work gets the better of me and I just like let things slide. So if I get these opportunities to talk to people honestly and let them know that I'm a real person and I'm dealing with my own things, hopefully other people can see that they're allowed to be their own people and do their own thing and deal with their own things and not beat themselves up about it. Because the fact is, you know, it's hard enough being human, let alone a good one or a bad one.
And you know, it's a tough gig that you've got where everything that you create for your work goes out to a public audience, and then everyone's got at Grange. Let's go. Let's provide the feedback there and then. I'm sure that any of us in our jobs, if everything we did on a daily basis was out for public opinion to see, we wouldn't enjoy that. So it's certainly an element of life that you deal well with, I think.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. I really appreciate that.
So, Grange, is there anything that we haven't covered that you would want to quickly let us know or talk about or anything like that? Or any of the other guys got any questions that we haven't asked?
I do have a question, and I think we need to make it accept now that this is no longer a comics and news podcast. This is an interview with Grange. And so we'll certainly reference this when we actually review the stories. But just your perspective, Grange, you said you obviously had to reread the Ibis Mystery, or was it a reread for you? Have you read this before? Is this the first time you read it?
It was a new project.
Right.
Like it was fresh eyes on it. So
and what did you think of the story? If you were to give Norman Worker's four-parter a review, what do you think of his storyline? What do you think of Carrie Lapinen's art? Is this a Phantom story that you enjoyed?
Well, you know, it's funny because Dudley and I were debating because I enjoyed the story. I liked the fact that it's been in a couple of Phantoms. I liked the fact that you know, Kit Walker was in it, and I like how it was like a unfinished business story for the Phantom. Like I like that element to the fact that it was never a resolved adventure, and it was always messily ended. Which I thought was kind of cool. Like it's a bit different. Like usually Phantoms, you know, it wraps it up, closes the book, and you know it's all good. Whereas this one, you know, it had like a bit of a lingering effect. But like, so in the first issue, it was quite deliberate of mine to do a bit of a sort of like a bewildered looking Phantom, where he looks a little bit like aggressive and a little bit like he's surveying his surrounds, like he doesn't get it. And then on the second issue, he's a very calm, relaxed Phantom, even though he's engulfed in fire because he knows that it's an illusion. So the idea is like it's a Phantom that grows through the storyline. Like he's originally, you know, like bewildered for a second, and then like, you know, because of the Chronicles, and he may be able to sort of understand the threat, that he was able to sort of be a bit more cool-headed about it and get through it. But it still costs him a lot, which is one of the reasons that the fourth cover is so bloody. Is because it's actually, you know, it's a very risky story. Like he can't take his threat for granted, and you know he's exposed to quite a lot of danger. So like the fifth cover, which is in my mind's eye at the moment, is actually going to incorporate some more of the Ibis Mystery. Sorry, the Ibis imagery is what I meant to say, not mystery. So like there'll be an Ibis in that, because if you've noticed, there hasn't actually been an Ibis in any of the covers except for the Pharaoh on the first one. There was supposed to be one in the fourth one, and Devil was supposed to be in the fourth one, but I was just running out of time. But yeah, so the fifth one's going to sort of bring all that together, and I've read the script and it's pretty cool. It sort of reopens that sense of dread that I reckon the Phantom has going into that sort of environment again, but like hopefully I've got a cool looking heroic phantom at the end for that story for you all to enjoy.
Who is the scriptwriter for the fifth one?
That's a really good. His name, it's Nicholas Scott's husband, Andrew
Constant, isn't it?
Constant. That's it.
Oh, there you go. Good.
Yeah, but yeah, it should be good. I don't want to make any comments on it, on that part of it, but yeah, I haven't seen any of the actual sequential art for it, but I'm looking forward to it. But as far as the story goes, I like it. Like, I know that the mystic or the supernatural stories aren't necessarily everybody's cup of tea when it comes to the Phantom, but I kind of like them. You know, it's no different than when Batman has to deal with some sort of a supernatural threat. Like, they're both the same sort of character in that sense of, you know, they're adventurers that have no powers, but they use their wits to survive, and they can outthink the problem, and like that's their core class of power. So, like, I quite enjoy those.
Awesome. No, I really enjoy that. Really enjoy your time tonight. Sorry, we've had a few technical difficulties along the way.
That's fine.
No, really enjoyed talking to you and getting an insight.
Yeah. Yeah, but at the end of the day, like, if I'm going to finish up on anything before we get going, it's just I've got to thank Dudley. I've got to thank Glenn. I mean, Dudley especially, like, him and I have had some really nice phone calls through this whole project, and you know, he sort of like even checked in on me to see how I'm going in terms of the lockdown and a few things like that.
Yep.
And he's got a family member who lives down here as well, so he's obviously concerned about them, and without going into too much detail on that. And yeah, he's just such a lovely fellow, and he's actually very gentle and caring gentleman, and it's been really nice. And I've spoken to Glenn a few times, and he's been great, and they both know that obviously I'm going to be becoming a father in in about 6 or 7 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever it's going to be, depending on when the kid wants to break all hell loose on us. But you know, like, they've been like really supportive of that, and you know, checking on, and it's just been really wonderful working with Frew this year. And so I thank him a lot, and thank him for the opportunity, and I hope you all have enjoyed the opportunity and how I've taken it. And yeah, it's just been a real treat. So thanks a lot for having me, you guys.
It's been our pleasure, Grange, and the levels of thought that you've put into each cover and your explanation of each cover has been fantastic. Like, it's more than just, oh, there's a few characters, let's just slapdash and put them on. You really told a story, and you mentioned sequential art, you know, in regards to the comic form, but your covers are more than just covers that just make a cool poster. They're, as you were saying before, they really tell that story of the adventure that the Phantom's having, and yeah, thank you for your time and sharing that with us today.
Absolute pleasure, and thanks for saying that so nicely.
I try.
I want to follow up from that, but I'm not sure how to word that better. Or you've done that really well, Steve. And thanks to Grange for sharing the personal side of, you know, what life's been like for you in the last 6 months or so as you've gone through the process, and personally what the covers mean to you. And I think that you can see that emotion out on the page, and anyone who's listened to this will be able to go back and have a renewed appreciation for them. And obviously, good luck to yourself and your partner over the next month and a half. I hope everything goes absolutely smoothly for you, and because it's not going to go smoothly for you after that. So good luck.
Mate. All hell is about to break loose.
If it goes any smoother than me trying to put the co-sleeping cot together, I'll be happy.
Thank you.
We've got our porta cot has still got hammer marks on it from where I tried to assemble it the first time.
Awesome.
That's gold. But yeah, no, it's
a little bit concerned, Dan. Your youngest is, what is he, 8, and you've still got your porta cot set up?
No, he's 11, and I don't have the porta cot. But wherever it is, it's probably in a dump. It would still have the hammer marks. It was not a PG experience watching me put that porta cot together.
It's not like Homer Simpson trying to put together the
it's almost exactly like that.
All right. Well, I think we'll finish off the podcast there. Hopefully, as you listen to this, it's kind of been concurrent, and because it's going to be a very interesting podcast to edit. The next podcast will be episode 168B, which will be the actual comics and news as we actually talk about the comics and news. A huge shout out to Grange, as put very elegantly by Dan and Stephen with their thanks. It was amazing listening to them. Hopefully the podcast is worth listening to. Hopefully you stick with us in episode 168B, because this has probably been our worst recording. We've not had recording issues like this for probably about 2 years. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Since we started, it's been what, 2.5, 3 hours now.
Yeah,
And the podcast itself is probably going to be what, 1.5.
Yeah. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm confident that the podcast will be a good podcast to listen to. So if you do want to stick with us, you can subscribe with us on iTunes or Spotify, or via apps like Podbean, Player FM, and Castbox. Or you can subscribe to us on YouTube. Our website is chroniclechamber.com, and our email is chroniclechamber@gmail.com. So huge thanks, guys, for sticking around with us. Happy phantoming from ourselves, and
Happy phantoming.
Happy fandoming.
Happy fandoming, fans.
500 years ago, he washed ashore the sole survivor of a shipwreck. And upon the skull of the man who killed his dad, he said, I'm mad, I must eradicate piracy, injustice and cruelty, and all my sons will follow me, so evildoers will believe that this man cannot die. The Phantom, the ghost who walks. The Phantom, enemies beware, the Phantom's always there, but you won't find the Phantom.